Good evening, everyone. My name is Judy Blake, and I'm with Family to Family Network in Houston, Texas. Thank you so much for joining us. We actually have some people from out of state, so they must be moving to Texas. And we also have people from other parts of Texas, people from Edinburgh and Harlingen and other areas, because we are doing multiple trainings and educating families on your rights as a parent in the special education process in public school. Thank you so much for joining us. This is a grant-funded program. If you could hold your questions until the end, that would be great. We want to make sure that we get to everyone, and we want to make sure that we cover all of the material. Just know that you will be getting the slides probably sometime in the next day or two. So you will have them as your reference. If you want to take notes, feel free. Some of you, as we suggested, we asked that you have your IEP handy so that you could kind of follow along with what we're doing. If not, you certainly have our notes that will be sent to you. So Christina, if you want to go ahead and start sharing your screen.
Yes, ma'am.
And by the way, if you get knocked off, don't worry, just log back in and we'll let you right in.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you,
Right.
Christina.
Let's see. There you go.
Groovy, thank you. So understanding your child's IEP, let's understand what it means. When we started doing this training, Leslie had a great, I forgot to introduce my colleagues. Leslie Lawson, Christina Zavala.
Hello, hola.
And Leonela Castillo.
Hola.
So Christina and Leonela are going to be presenting in Spanish on February 21st. If you know anybody that might want to join us, make sure they register, and we would love to have them join us. But when we were starting with this training, Leslie had the great idea, kudos to Leslie, that let's start with breaking down what is the IEP and what does it mean? Because until you really understand what that means, the rest of the information won't make much sense. So thank you, Leslie. Next slide, please. No problem.
Okay. You know how that is.
Yep, I do. It should be at the bottom. There you go. So just know that this is a really safe space. You just have to keep hitting enter. There you go. So no judgment here. This is a judgment-free zone. We know that what we're giving you is a lot of information. You are not expected to remember everything. Leslie, myself, Leonela, Christina, we are learning new things every single day. And we know that it's a lot of information. Once you wait until the presentation is finished, we will be able to answer your questions. We know that some people are a little shy. No worries, we understand. Feel free to private message any one of us, and we will be happy to ask the question anonymously on your behalf. Please make sure that you mute yourself so that everyone can hear the presentation. And then once we are asking questions, you can unmute yourself. You can also write your question in the chat box. We hope to finish in an hour. We ran over a little bit today by about 10 or 15 minutes. If you need to sign off, we understand. Again, you will be getting the slides, and it's no problem. We'd love to hear from you if you have follow-up questions. So we just wanted to go over a few brief abbreviations because some of you on the survey had mentioned that, your child is 0 to 3 and you haven't even had an IEP yet. You haven't had even your first ARD meeting. It's going to be scheduled maybe in the next few months. So a few abbreviations we wanted to go over were, and you just want to hit enter, there you go. So ECI stands for Early Childhood Intervention. And that is for children that are birth to 3 years old. ECSE is early childhood special education. So for those of us like Leslie and I who are ancient, they used to call that PPCD, preschool program for children with disabilities. And once your child left the ECI program, they went into PPCD. Well, now school districts call it ECSE. So that's basically for children who are just over 3 years old and before they hit kindergarten. Everything that we talk about, this is not Family to Family Network law. This is not Judy Blake law, Leslie, Leonella, Christina. This is federal law that we're telling you. It's the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. You're going to hear the term IDEA. And what that is for is to ensure that children in public schools who have disabilities are having their needs met, those educational needs. And it's really heartbreaking that it wasn't until 1975 when children with disabilities could even go to school. So in 1975, I was 13 years old. Could you imagine if I had had a disability, I would not have even been able to attend school? And that's really sad. So we want kids to be included. We want them to be learning, and everyone has that ability. You're going to hear the term ARD in referring to ARD meeting. That stands for admission, review, and dismissal. IEP, which is what we're going to be reviewing in just a few minutes. An individualized education plan. And notice that I said the word individualized. So the IEP that Leslie had for her son would be different than the IEP that I had for my son, which would be different than the IEP that Leonella has for her son. Some kids have behavior challenges. And when they have a behavior challenge, we want to know, well, what's causing that behavior? So parents can request what they call an FBA, which is a functional behavior assessment. And then once that's completed, the school implements and writes what they call a BIP, which stands for Behavior Intervention Plan. So unfortunately, in the special education system, we have so many abbreviations, and it's really frustrating. These are kind of the basics just to get you started. Okay, so we're going to go, I'm just going to go through the first part of it, and then Leslie's going to go over from here. So at the top of every page, you're going to see, the name of the student. Make sure you understand what school district your child is in. Some parents, when we talk to them, they're not even sure what school district. And the reason that's really important is because if you ever have any problems and you need to contact the district, you need to know what school district they're in. Some areas, they're divided. For example, Katy could be Katy ISD or Fort Bend ISD. And ISD stands for Independent School District. So make sure that you understand what school district your child is zoned to. You'll see at the top where they have the age. And in this case, the grade is EE because this is a young child. This IEP is going to be different than maybe your child if your child is 7 or 8, because this one is going to focus on different items rather than a 7 or 8-year-old that might have more academic goals. We still want our preschoolers to learn, but just know that this is going to be a different kind of IEP, one that maybe your child might be a little bit different. So we're just going to highlight different points. We don't have time to go through every slide and every word on every slide. But one of the things that you want to notice is at the bottom, meets eligibility criteria for primary disability. So this says, and I really love this, which means I don't, non-categorical early childhood, like really? But that's what they call it. And the secondary disability is speech. So on the right-hand side, where you see that blue writing, it's really, really important that you know what disability your child has been diagnosed with by the school district and meets eligibility criteria for. In some cases, it could say autism. In some cases, it could say intellectual. But make sure that you know on that first page, what is your child's disability? And then you'll see where they highlighted autism, which kind of makes me wonder, rather than putting non-categorical early childhood, why didn't they just put autism? But they didn't. So we just want to make sure that you notice and make note of what that eligibility criteria is. Next page. So this is, again, a very unusual term, and the acronym is PLAFP. And it's really unusual, but it stands for Present Levels of Academic Achievement and Functional Performance. So you can see right underneath there where the box is checked yes. The ARD committee reviewed achievement of the previous year's goals on the IEP. And you want to make sure that these goals, these present levels, are very, very specific of what your child can do and what they might struggle with. They're listing their strengths. And you want to make sure that you have this information before your ARD meeting so that you can review it. What you don't want is to be handed this 35, 40-page document at the ARD meeting with people all looking around you. They all have looked at it, and this is the first time that you're looking at it. You want to make sure that it's a very clear picture of your child. You know, their strengths, the concerns, and how those challenges might impact your child's development in the classroom, both educationally and socially. So I would ask the school for a draft copy, maybe 3 or 4 days before. But you want to make sure you have that so you can look at it, highlight parts of it, and make sure that you understand it. And Leslie, feel free to jump in.
Hey, can we go back to the first page for just a
Sure,
second?
you bet.
I just wanted to mention that up at the top where it says full and individual evaluation, those dates are real important.
Oh, thank you.
The date that the last formal evaluation was done, they're required to do a read and decide if there needs to be new formal evaluation at least every 3 years. But you can request new evaluations not more than once a year. Not that you'd want to do it every year, but if things are changing or there's a problem or they're making a whole lot of progress, just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, thank you. And you'll see that the next FIE, that full and individual evaluation, they're making sure it's in that 3-year time frame. And you want to make sure that you know that, because we have parents calling us saying, my child hasn't been evaluated in 4 years. And that shouldn't be happening. They should be evaluated at a minimum every 3 years. Thank you, Leslie. So again, make sure that you have that draft copy so you know what is going to be discussed in the meeting. A lot of times we suggest keeping a binder, keeping some kind of folder, whatever works best for you. So you'll see at the bottom, in-school observations and data. So several areas are going to be discussed on this page and the next page. Make sure that all areas are included. So you'll see where they start to talk about behavioral and social. And then you'll see this IEP, the duration of services is from November of 2021 to November of 2022. So you know exactly when this is supposed to be implemented. Next slide. So you could see that they're talking about the concerns. They're talking about self-care, cognition. And like I said, if this was an older child, you might get into more of the academics, but at least they have under the strengths marks on a paper to color, completes simple puzzles. And the reason they call this present levels is, where is the child at? If you don't know where the child is at, you don't know where they're going to go and what to work on. So just make sure that all of this in here is an accurate picture of your child. At the bottom, you're going to see accommodations, and they have encourage classroom participation. Let's see what other accommodations this child has. So you can see at the top, teacher check for understanding, visual aids, clearly defined limits. So this child needs a lot of structure, provide sensory chewy tube. That's really important. So you want to make sure that that is all documented in that IEP. So when they talk about additional needs for this child, transition, since the child is so young, we don't need to talk about transition at this time because that's typically for older children. But notice how for behavior, they say yes. Does child's behavior impede child's own learning or that of others? They say no. So there is not a behavior intervention plan for this child.
But there should be, if that's checked, yes, typically there would be one.
Exactly. And that's why you want to make sure, are you having a lot of behaviors? Was your child in a maybe a daycare setting prior to entering the school? And when there are a lot of challenging behaviors, well, chances are those may not go away at school. And that might be revised. But for now, they're saying there doesn't need to be a behavior intervention plan. Yet, they're telling you the child has challenging behaviors. So that would need to be addressed. So communication needs of the student. They're saying, yes, the child has communication needs and should be addressed through supplementary aids and services, and that the student is affected by autism spectrum disorder. Assistive technology. The student will not be able to participate in the educational program or make reasonable progress without assistive technology. So there you know that your child is going to need something to help them in the learning process. We just want to make sure that parents really understand what it is the school is telling you, what they're supposed to deliver, so that you can make sure that this is truly done. Did I cover everything on that, Leslie? Okay. So this child will require the use of visual supports. And that basically sums it up. Student needs access to specialized instruction to make progress toward participation in age-appropriate activities. So yes, they're using that early childhood special education curriculum, but we just want to make sure that your child is getting those accommodations so that they can fully be engaged in class. And those accommodations were on the previous page that I just talked about. Next page. So now we're going to go over the goals, and you can see at the very top, the goal focus here is behavior, and it's functional. And these are benchmarks, or what they call short-term objectives. So, you know, we don't necessarily love every one of these objectives written, but overall, this was a really good IEP, which was why we chose it. And notice at the bottom where it says implementer, PPCD, teacher and staff. And the method of evaluation will be data collection. So what that means is that the school needs to collect data on these short-term objectives to show that your child is indeed progressing. And we want to make sure that they are progressing. So they're telling you right there that they should have that data collected. and you'll see a number 2 where it says by the end of the third 9 weeks. They should be able to show you that data. Next slide. Here's another one for behavior. And this is just another measurable annual goal and a sample of 3 well-written short-term objectives. It tells you by the end of the second 9 weeks, by the end of the third 9 weeks, and then the fourth 9 weeks. Again, you'll see at the bottom that it's going to be the PPCD teacher, which really that should probably say early childhood special education because they've changed that term, and the staff, and they're going to be collecting that data. Next page, please. Again, more benchmarks, more short-term objectives. And you'll see at the top, the goal focus here is behavior. So remember at the beginning when we talked about that FBA, that functional behavior analysis, and they said that the child didn't need a behavior intervention plan? It will be really interesting to see if all of these short-term objectives really work and those accommodations really work, or that child will need that functional behavioral assessment analysis, and will that behavior intervention plan be needed? So it would be very interesting to know. Not that we will, but it would have been great to know. Next slide, please.
Yeah, and we don't really have to go through all of these. I
Yep.
just wanted to put them in there for y'all to look at later.
Yep.
To see a lot of samples of pretty well-written annual goals and short-term objectives.
Yep, because we will be short on time. Next page, please. So again, more samples. This though is for social skills. Notice the goal focus is social skills at the top. Next slide. And more social skills. Next slide. And another one for social skills. And again, notice that they're supposed to be collecting that data. Leslie, you want to take over at this point?
Okay. Another sample, and communication is going to be very important area if your child doesn't have a good way to communicate. And as you'll see on this one, the implementer's going to be the teacher, but also the speech and language pathologist. So you'll see later that the child's going to get speech and language therapy since they do have a speech delay. Okay. And you can kind of skip through these. I'm not going to talk about each goal. I just put them in there so y'all could go back and look and have some really good examples. Yeah, and Judy already covered that. You know, with an older child would probably have more academic goals, but since this child is younger, you're not going to see as many. They're using the term cognition. I guess that could be the same thing, but it's going to look a little different for an older child. You might have some very specific academic goals, like for reading and math, with the annual goal and the short-term objectives. And you can keep going, Christine, until we get to the, self-care. Really wanted to put that in for the people that have young kids, because a lot of times parents will say, oh, they told me that we couldn't have a goal for potty training or something like that. But you can, if that's going to affect how they progress in the curriculum, because, you know, behavior and not being able to take care of your bathroom needs, if possible, that can be something that's going to keep you out of the general ed classroom. So you definitely want to work on that at school, especially if the parents are also working on it at home. Everybody needs to kind of be on the same page for that. You can keep going. Here's another page where they're talking about accommodations. And I just want to say, you know, every accommodation doesn't need to be checked. You're going to be able to give them some input. What accommodations do you provide at home? You know, what do you do to help them at home? And that might help them to help them at school also. And if the teacher has so many accommodations, they're going to see that what really works for the kid, because you don't want them to just see, oh, I can't do all of those, I'm not going to do anything. So just, you know, your input is going to be very, very important for the PLAF, for the goals, for the accommodations. So don't leave it up to them, because you know your child best. Just highlighted some things here about special programs like the behavior intervention plan, assistive technology. Just be aware of that. And if your child's supposed to have a behavior intervention plan, you know, and they have it marked wrong, this is like a contract, because at the end of the meeting, you're going to sign whether you agree or disagree. You wouldn't sign a contract for a bank loan if you didn't know what the terms of the loan were, what the interest rate was, what your payments are going to be. Think of it that way, because this is what they're supposed to provide. So you want to make sure it's right on paper. And you're a very important member of the ARD committee. Okay.
I'm sorry, I was going to ask, there's a question there, but are you leaving it for later?
Let me look real quick.
Mm-hmm.
It says I don't have this template for the IEP. I just got the complete evaluation and the annual goals. The annual goals looks alike, but it is not the same. Should I ask for a different document? I would ask for a draft copy of the IEP in its entirety.
Did she say she hasn't had the ARD meeting yet, or she has?
Well, all she said, oh, she didn't say. We did have it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, anytime you have an ARD meeting, they should provide you with the complete IEP, including the minutes or the deliberations. So you're entitled to that. And in some of our other trainings, we're going to talk more in depth about a lot of this stuff, and we're going to recommend that you get a parent handbook that tells you all of your rights in very easy to understand terms. But yes, I would never leave an ARD meeting without having a complete copy of the IEP. Now, if they wanted to just send you draft copies ahead of time so you could prepare and be an equal member of the ARD committee, that's one thing. But when you leave the meeting, you definitely should have a complete copy of your child's IEP.
And something I do as well, just to make it easier on yourself, ask them also to send you an electronic copy. That way you always have it in your computer.
Good idea.
I think that's really helpful. So you don't have to scan 44 pages yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I don't know why they didn't give that to you. Yeah, definitely.
You'll see a page about state assessments. You know, not every grade level takes the STAR state assessments. So pay close attention to that. And there are different STAR assessments. There's a physical fitness assessment, whether or not your child's going to participate in that. Does your student have limited English proficiency? Because if they do, they're going to need to address that. District-wide assessments, you want to make sure, you know, if they're in pre-K or pre-K age, I think it's really important if your child can participate in any benchmark testing or first grade, whatever grade they're in, because that kind of gives you an idea of where they stand with their typically developing peers, the kids that are the same age that don't have a disability. And that tells you a lot, because a lot of times all parents see, or what they get home on the IEPs, and that's could be very different in how they're progressing in the general education curriculum. And you just want to have a clear picture of that. And this child, of course, is not old enough to take the START test, so that's why they have marked no. Okay, and then the next slide. This is about least restrictive environment. Some people say inclusion. You know, the spirit of the law says all children with disabilities should be educated with their same age peers who don't have a disability. And only if they can't make appropriate progress on their IEP goals should they be put in a more segregated environment. And that's including all types of accommodations, services, supports, maybe in-class support. You really don't want to put a child in a segregated class and make them have to work their way out, because they're not exposed to the same curriculum. And you know, it's very individualized for each child. And some people, a lot of times, especially for the younger kids, the kids that are not kindergarten age, they say, well, this is the only class they have. But there are other options. Some kids go to private preschool at their church and still get their speech therapy at school. So there's lots of different options. Some kids that age go to the typical pre-K class and have special education support in the pre-K class. So there's lots of options, and the law is very clear about educating children in the least restrictive environment with all the supports and services available before they move them from that. Because we don't want to be making any big decisions on whether or not a child's going to do something or not do something at such a young age. You'll also see on here where they talk about does the teacher or any of the staff need extra training? It's fine. It's okay for you to ask what kind of training. If you have a child with autism, what kind of training has the teacher had to support students with autism? Because special education teachers don't always have specific training in certain areas. They may know nothing about certain assistive technology. They may, if a paraprofessional is going to support your child in the general education classroom, they may not really know how to do that. And there's trainings at our education service centers for our teachers and other staff, so they can be prepared to support the student and whatever disability they have. Let's see. And so this is where you want to pay attention. How much of the day is your child going to be included in the regular ed classroom? Are they going to receive all their instruction in a special education class? You really want to know what your child's day is going to look like. And it's going to be documented on the schedule of services page that'll be coming up soon. And anything that's not in this IEP document, like if you want to know something specific, get it documented in the minutes or deliberations. You know, you're not going to have every word for word in the minutes of the meeting or the deliberations, but anything important, you want to make sure it's documented. Because a month later, if something's not happening like you discussed in the meeting, you can go refer back to that. If not, they're like, oh, I don't remember us saying we would do that, or we wouldn't do this, or whatever.
Yeah, because you have to remember too, if it's verbal, but it's not written, then it didn't happen. And these school districts, you know, they could be doing, you know, 4 ARD meetings, 5 ARD meetings a day. So they're not going to remember. So make sure, if it's really important to you, make sure it's in those minutes.
Okay. Next page. On this page, it's more considerations about educating the student in general ed setting with supplementary aids and services. And they're just going to mark different things off. This is one we highlighted because, the student does have behavioral needs, but yet there was no behavior intervention plan, which I think that was kind of contradicts some of the previous pages. Speech therapy, that's something you might want to talk about and get in the minutes, because if your child's receiving speech, how many times a week? Is it one-on-one? Is it in a small group? Is it the speech and language pathologist, or is it a speech assistant? You want to know all of those things. So I'm just trying to make the point that everything in this document is important for you to understand. Not that you're going to pick everything apart or anything, but I don't want any parent thinking, oh, my child's getting this when they're really not. So it's just really important to know. This is some of at the bottom is some of the harmful effects if the child's not included with their typically developing peers. And so that's why you see this so much, because they know how important it is for kids to have appropriate speech models, communication, social skills, behavior, and to be exposed to the same curriculum. Because if you're in a totally segregated class, the curriculum's going to be different. Yes, it's going to be based on the same curriculum, but it's going to be very reduced. So just wanted to point that out. Next slide. So this is right here. To me, I think all students should have an opportunity to participate with students without disabilities in some non-academic or at least in some non-academic or extracurricular activities. Maybe it's not on transportation. Maybe they need to ride the special education bus, but what about recess? What about lunch? Are they going to get to go on the field trips? So make sure and pay attention to this. Yeah, and we don't want you to stress over every single minute of the day, but you do want to have a good idea of your child's schedule and where they're going to be in different parts of the day. It should be clear to you. Okay, next page. So this is a very important page to understand. This is your schedule of services page, and it talks about, as you can see, this IEP is not going into effect until November. That could be because their annual R dates in November instead of at the beginning of the year or end of the year. And so just pay attention to that, because you'll see on this example, you're going to have different dates down in the box. You're going to have 2021 to 2022, and then you're going to have 2022 to 23, because it's in the middle of the year when they're having their R. So that's why they have both on this. You can see at the top, the year that they're in now, when they had the meeting, the child was going half a day, where next year the child's going to go full day, because this is a younger child. ESY, extended school year services. Does your child need extended school year services? A lot of times they just mark it no, and they really don't talk to you about it. And they say, oh, well, we don't think your child's going to regress over breaks, but they have to take data to prove that your child doesn't regress over breaks. So, and of course, if if they recommend ESY, and that's kind of like summer school, special education summer school, and that's not, maybe you're going on a family vacation, it doesn't work, you don't have to accept it. But if your student needs it and you do want it for your child, it definitely needs to be addressed. And most students on the autism spectrum are going to need ESY. It doesn't, and ESY doesn't look the same for every student. One year, my son, all we did for ESY was he continued to get speech services over the summer. Some students do some of the summer schools that are for typical kids but have special education support. Some kids do a special education ESY program, so it can look very different. It shouldn't be cookie cutter, just like everybody's IEP is going to be different. This is the page in the block where it's going to tell you, this probably isn't the best example because it's a young child, but like it tells you how many minutes of everything they're going to get per day. The speech is going to be on a different page, but this is where you might see if your child's in special education and resource class, how many minutes are they in resource, maybe for English or math? And then how many minutes do they have in-class support in regular education, in the regular education class? So this is an important page for you to understand. You know, none of us understood this. You have to ask questions. You don't want to be agreeing to something that you don't understand. So, and, you know, don't let them rush you. You know what? If you don't get through with the meeting in the allotted amount of time, you can table the art and come back and finish it. So you want to get all your questions answered. A lot of that you can do ahead of time by getting the copies, the draft copies of everything, and maybe asking some questions beforehand. And that makes your ARD meeting go a little smoother. Okay, next page. Here's where you have your speech therapy. You want to understand it because a lot of times they put it in minutes. Sometimes you might see a large number of minutes for the whole year. So just make sure you understand that. Like if you look at this, the child is going to get direct speech therapy. What does that mean? Does that mean it's one-on-one? Does it mean it's in a group? How many are in the group? You know, you want to know that, because if your child's getting 15 minutes a week of group speech therapy and the group has 5 kids in it, is that really even beneficial? And at that time, you might want to say, I don't think that's appropriate. I think my son's nonverbal and he needs more speech therapy. And do we need to do an independent evaluation outside of the school and see what they say? We just want you to know and be clear on what your child is going to receive and make sure you agree with that. As you can see, they're going to get 7 sessions in a 9-week period. Okay, 30 minutes. Why aren't they getting 30 minutes every week? You know, that would be my question. I don't know. And, you know, I didn't know how much speech my son needed when he was young, but I knew he needed one-on-one speech, and then I knew he needed another session of group speech to transition that, what he learned one-on-one, into the natural environment. Go with your gut. You know your kid better than anybody else, and you can always get an outside evaluation, especially if you're not able to get private speech therapy after school with your insurance, you know, if this is all the speech your kid is going to get.
And those are great points, Leslie. And Daniela, you asked about, you know, can you ask for individualized speech therapy? Absolutely. And exactly what Leslie did is what I did for my son. He had one 30-minute session of individual and one 30-minute session of group. And they're both important for different reasons, but absolutely you can ask. And Daniela, we will get, or Stacy, we will get to your question when Leslie's finished.
And just remember, everything that your child receives is based on need. It's not what the school wants. It's not what you want. It's what do they need? What's appropriate? And so if there's a disagreement in what's appropriate, that's why, and we'll talk about this in different other trainings, that's why that IEE, that independent evaluation at the school's expense, can be like a second opinion. They do have to consider it. It's not something set in stone, but like if they're saying, oh, we're going to give your kid 20 minutes, 7 sessions per 9 weeks, and then you get an IEE and they say the child needs a lot more, then maybe you can compromise. So just keep that in mind.
And also to make sure that you communicate, find out who the speech therapist is. I'm not saying to email them after every session, but every, maybe few sessions, find out, how's it going? Is there anything that they're working on that you can work on in the home? Things like that really do make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, next slide. This page, it's really, to let the Texas Education Agency know, and that's how the school gets paid, like that 45 full-time early childhood. But if you want to know what it means, feel free to ask. This 45 full-time is going to let you know that the child is basically in a self-contained special education class all day. So just be aware of that. And that doesn't necessarily mean just PPCD. So ask what that means, because I have a lot of parents that think their child's included for parts of the regular education day. And then when I look at this page, I see not really. So you just want to know, because whatever the art committee, including you, decide is appropriate for your child, you want to make sure that's what's on the paperwork, because that's what the teacher and the staff are going to see, and that's what they're going to be, that's what they're going to do, because this is what they have to follow. Be sure and ask about transportation. If you can't bring your child to school or they need special transportation, they shouldn't tell you can't have it. We hear that a lot. So just pay attention to that. Kind of in the middle of the page, it talks about not every program, special education program, is on every campus. So in this case, this child is going to a different school than the home school that their neighborhood goes to, because maybe their homeschool doesn't have the early childhood program, but they're required to make sure the student goes to the closest early childhood program to their home school. That can happen with the early childhood if they needed an adaptive behavior class, or maybe even a life skills class. So just pay attention to that, because if all possible, you want your students to go to the same school that your neighbors' kids are going to go to, because you want to build community and you want them to have friends and in your neighborhood. And that's easier to happen if they're all going to the same school. I just wanted everybody to know what an LSSP is. That's a licensed specialist in school psychology. They're the ones that usually do the formal evaluations. They might be the one to come out and do a functional behavioral assessment. Sometimes teachers do functional behavioral assessments, but just remember they're not specialists in that area. And sometimes we need a specialist if the behaviors are not getting better. And when I say behaviors, I don't necessarily mean throwing yourself on the floor and tantruming. It could be something. Earlier today, we had a student that was older, and she was going into the class and she was not sitting in her chair and she was getting up and talking and doing some things like that, and that needed to be addressed. So sometimes you need somebody like a licensed school psychologist or a behavior specialist to come in and do that functional behavioral assessment. Again, you're going to see I highlighted ESY just because I want you to know about ESY and explore that option for your child if it's needed.
I want to mention too that about ESY, extended school year services, we tend to believe that, if you have a child with autism, that can be beneficial, but you also have to do what works for the family. And these extended school year programs are for 6 weeks out of the summer and maybe 3 or 4 hours out of the day. If you're a working parent like I am, or like all of us are, then that may not work for you, and that's okay. We just want to make sure that you're aware, that you know it's a possibility, and that you go for it if that's what you want.
Yeah, and your child doesn't have to have autism.
Yeah, it could be any.
It could be any disability, but we're just when a lot of students with autism definitely will regress, especially over the summer if they don't get some services. Okay, next slide. And here's where they're going to mark off other things like assistive technology, the goals, and everybody's paperwork isn't going to look just like this. So don't panic if your paperwork doesn't look like this format, because we just want you to know all the pieces that should be part of the IEP, because different school districts use different software for this. You just want to make sure it's all in there. If your child has autism, there's going to be an autism supplement that's coming up here in a minute, but it should be marked off. If your child's getting transportation, personal care services, if you've signed a Medicaid consent form to allow the school, if your child has Medicaid, sometimes if you sign a form that allows them to bill your Medicaid, it doesn't affect your Medicaid services in any way. It just allows them to bill for certain things that could be that, and this could be changing because some new laws or policy are coming out this year about that, but just be aware of that. You don't have to sign it if you don't feel comfortable signing it. So just wanted you to know about that if in case they ask you about that. I highlighted this down here because the mom indicated that this was during COVID, so she was going to participate in our ARD meeting by phone, but then she gave them permission to have the ARD meeting if she wasn't available. I would never do that. Those ARD meeting must be scheduled at a mutually agreed upon time. And I guarantee if they had to cancel and you showed up, they are not going to let you have the ARD meeting by yourself. So you want to be part of that because, like I said, you know your child best and you're the expert on your child. You're gonna know they're gonna list all the members in attendance. It's good for you to know who's there and why they're there. So just pay attention to that because you might need to contact somebody like if a regular education teacher's there and you have questions about the curriculum, that'd be a good person. The speech path should be there if there's speech goals. Now they may let somebody go early once they're completed with their part, and that's fine. But if you need them to be there, they need to be there. And in the handbook that we're going to recommend in our other trainings, there's a list of all required members of the ARD committee. So next slide. And then this is here. I just don't like it when they automatically put that a student's not going to take district assessments. They've already decided that, and I think that a discussion should be had about that. And then a lot of this is just list of stuff we've already talked about. So we can go to the next slide. Related services. It just talks about the related services that your child's going to have, you know, in their speech therapy, transportation, how often they're going to monitor progress. Progress should be monitored at least the same as the students without disability. So if everybody's getting a progress report, your student should be getting a progress report. Same with the report cards. And it lists the supplementary aids like assistive technology, which could be low tech or high tech, like a voice output device, or it could be a letter board or picture symbols, lots of different things.
So Leslie, you had mentioned, I think, a parent had asked privately, PCS. So PCS is picture communication symbols. And
no, PCS is personal care services.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking of the other PCS.
That's PECS.
Oh, PECS. You're right. Thank you. Yes. So personal care services is PCS. Thank you, Leslie.
Oh, no problem.
To the parent, if that didn't answer your question, let us know.
Yeah, that's just like some students are going to require help in the bathroom or changing if they, you know, they may have a physical disability or things like that. What kind of personal care services are they going to need? Because, you know, one mom asked earlier today, is my child going to be able to go to school if they're not potty trained? Absolutely. They can't deny your child services because your child is not potty trained. So they just have to help. I mean, there are some people who have multiple disabilities or like cerebral palsy, and they're always going to need help in the bathroom. So yeah, that we're not going to exclude anybody from school. Next slide. The 5-day notice. So at the end of the meeting, if everybody agrees to everything, they're going to ask you if you want to waive the 5-day notice, the 5-day wait. If you're in disagreement, and we'll talk a lot about this more when we talk about what to do if you don't agree, but don't let them make you feel like, oh, well, if you don't sign today, your child can't come to school tomorrow. No, they can. They can still go to school and follow the other IEP until y'all come to some kind of agreement about the new IEP. Next slide.
And speaking about that, Leslie, there was a parent who had asked, my son's had an IEP with Alief ISD in 2022. We did not go to pre-K. We then moved to Fort Bend. So the IEP is 2 years old, and we have a meeting next week with the school specialist. Should we ask for a new IEP? They are nonverbal, need help with feeding, scheduled potty. They did not mention about school bus, and we live 1.7 miles from the school. They did not mention about a special aid to help them. They were 3 when they had the IEP, and now they're 5. So I know that the rule many, many, many years ago, because my son is now 28, is that if your child lived, I believe it was 0.25 miles from the school, you are eligible for bus transportation. I'm not sure if that's the same, but that's what it was many, many years ago. I would ask and bring that up in the art about transportation. I would imagine that transportation should be provided. And then, Leslie, do you want to answer the other question, or did you want me to answer it?
What was the other one?
About should they ask for a new IEP because it's been 2 years? I would.
Yeah, I mean, generally, if you're changing school districts, the receiving school district has to follow the previous school's IEP. But if it's been 2 years, that IEP is really not going to be valid.
Yep.
Really, you might even need a new full evaluation. Now,
I
the
would do
kids
that.
could go ahead and start based
Mhm.
on some of that information in that IEP and anything you want to update. But yeah,
I
definitely.
would ask for a full and individual evaluation.
Yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
even if your child's nonverbal and things like that, kids change every week, you know, so you definitely want everything updated.
And you want it to be really clear in the IEP. How are they going to communicate with your child? Are they going to use the PECS pictures, the picture exchange communication? Are they going to use adaptive technology? How are they going to communicate with your child?
Yep. Next slide.
Okay. Sorry, I was the one asking that question. So she told me it's gonna be an hour of Zoom when we had the meeting. So it's just a beginning, right? And then I will have more meeting with her for the new IEP. Is that what you mean?
So she's going to observe for an hour your child?
No, she said she's gonna schedule a Zoom meeting with me for possible an hour.
Okay,
She didn't mention anything about the IEP.
well, I would write them. You can do it before or after the meeting. But they have to keep the IEP that was in A-Leaf ISD. They can use that, but I would tell them you want a new evaluation.
How old are the kids?
They're now
They are
5.
5 right now. They were 3 when we did the IEP.
Okay.
So many things changed for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would definitely ask them for that.
So if your
Okay.
child is of school age, they have to let them go to school and make until they get the new evaluation done. So they can't tell you to keep your kid home if your child's school age just because they have a disability. So we heard a lot about that happening in HISD, and that should not be happening. So, but if you have like a lot of very specific questions, a lot of this we're going to cover in some of our upcoming trainings about special education, what you need to know, very specific information. But if you have some pressing issues where you can't wait for those trainings, feel free to call our office, and one of our parent liaisons, either myself or Judy or Leonella, will get with you and talk specifics.
Yeah. Can I email Judy about my question, because my appointment coming up, so I just want to make sure I bring it up to her.
Go ahead and email me, and we're going to continue going because Leslie has more pages to go through. But yeah, go ahead and email Stacy, and then Sloan and Wanda, we will get to your questions. We promise.
Okay.
Thank you, Judy.
You're welcome.
That last page was the signature page, and I was just going to stress again. Can you go back? I think maybe you're going forward and not back.
Let me see. Hold on just a second.
One. There.
There you go.
So this is where everybody's going to sign, do they agree or disagree? So you shouldn't be marking a little, if you're not finished with the meeting should be tabled, and you should come back and finish it. Don't let them rush you if you haven't figured everything out. Don't agree if you don't understand something, and don't agree if you don't agree with something. I'm not saying you're going to nitpick every little thing, but if you need to disagree, it's okay to disagree, and you're going to work through that. So I just don't want you agreeing to things you don't agree to or you're not sure of. If you disagree, you can come back. There's a 10-day or more recess, and you come back and try to work things out. So we'll go over that more. So, but it's very important. Don't agree if you don't agree. I mean, yeah, don't disagree if you don't agree. Okay, you can go to the next. Prior written notice, that's just, they have to let you know if they're going to change something or do something or not do something. They have to put that in writing, and it's called prior written notice. And they have to tell you why they rejected it, or why they're not doing it, or why they're doing it. And that gives you a chance to do whatever you need to do if you don't agree with their decision. Once a year, they're required once a year to give you the procedural safeguards. Hopefully you've all received a copy of the procedural safeguards. It's really important for you to read your procedural safeguards. It's not a fun read, but it tells you what your rights are and what to do if you disagree. And of course, like I said, we'll go over a lot of that in a different training. We can't cover that. We're just trying to cover all the different pieces of the IEP tonight. Things should be in your native language if needed. You know, they can't expect you to read English if you don't read English. Okay, next page. Always get a copy of your ARD paperwork, your IEP with the deliberations and everything. Always read over it before you sign, agree, make sure nothing's changed than what you talked about. Real important to know, SPED text up at the top highlighted. You can call them, you can chat online, you can email them if you have some specific questions. And this is manned by people at our education service centers, and they're very helpful. I reached out to them. I like to chat or email, because then if I ask a question and they answer it and tell me something different than what the school told me, then I can bring it to the school and say, hey, this didn't seem right to me. So I called SPED text. I checked with SPED text, and they're saying, no, it should be this way. And they know that SPED text knows the laws and the rules. They're not going to give, everything's not black and white in special education. There's a lot of gray area that can be interpreted different ways. So there are some things you have to work through. Make sure you get a copy of your ARD. Okay, next page. We're not going to go over the autism supplement, and the autism supplement is, Texas is the only state that has this, but it's 11 extra protections for students on the autism spectrum. And it should be very specific to your child. You'll see, I like this example because you can see it's specific to this particular child. It shouldn't have just cookie cutter information in for each topic, the daily schedule, and all of the ones in bold. They have to consider each strategy for a child with autism. And these are good to know about even if your child doesn't have autism, because even though your child without autism doesn't have an autism supplement, there's some very good things in here you might feel your child could benefit for that you could ask for. Next one. That's some more pieces of the autism supplement. They should always put you in contact with your local IDD authority. In Harris County, that's the Harris Center. In Fort Bend, it's Texana. That's where you sign up for the Medicaid waivers, the long-term care services that your child is going to need, and you want to get on the interest list. And then they also have some other general revenue services that may be available to you now, like respite care. Okay, next page. So that's where I just wanted you to be able to see the whole autism supplement, and that's where it ends. And then Then they're going to talk about personal care services because this child is very young. That's good to know. Next slide.
So that's where, oh, okay.
Go ahead, Judy.
Yeah, so that's where personal care services are provided during the school day. And they, checked off hallway, restroom, cafeteria. You'll see at the bottom where it starts transportation services. So we just want you to understand the different sections, and so that you make sure that what they have checked is what you are receiving and what you are agreeing to. So go to the next page. So here they talk about transportation. And one thing I want to make sure you realize is that school districts don't have control over the buses. Years ago, I'm talking 25 years ago, they used to call it the bus barn. And now I don't know what they call it, but basically the bus division, they will tell you when your child is going to be picked up and dropped off each day. So if the program starts at 8:30 in the morning, your child may be picked up at 7 a.m. for all you know. And if that's too early for you, then you don't have to take bus transportation. But you just need to be aware they are transporting so many children, and you want to make sure that that you don't have to accept it if it doesn't work out for you time-wise. I always took it and it was great. And I always make sure the first few days that I walked my son right to the bus, introduced him to the bus driver, make sure he knew who I was. I gave him my cell phone number. I did all of that because you never know what information they have. And if your child is nonverbal, it's very, very important that they have the information they need. Don't just assume the school is going to give it to them.
Right.
Make sure your bus driver has it.
Yeah, they need to know, and you'll see, it might be on the next page, if your child cannot be dropped off without a parent there.
Exactly. Yeah, it's actually at the bottom.
Okay,
no
I
one
can't
is
see
at
the bottom.
Oh, yeah. If no one is at the delivery address, can the student be left unattended? And the answer is no. So just make sure if that applies to your child, that is checked mark no. You'll also see in the middle of the page where it says child seat. So we got to make sure that student has a child seat. Next page. And we're at the very end here, people. We know we've gone over.
Yeah, that's just the Medicaid consent form. Like if you're going to allow them to bill your Medicaid, and that's not going to pertain to everybody. Just wanted people to know about it. Next page. Oh, I think we went backwards, maybe. There we go. Keep going. Yep. I mean, we pretty much covered it. I know it was fast. There's a lot of pieces to the IEP, but just wanted to give you an overview. You'll probably go back and look at your child if your child has an IEP in a whole different view. Now, like I said, it's not going to look just like that, but you want to make sure all the pieces are there.
Christina, if you want to stop sharing your screen. And then I believe we had a couple of questions still. I was informed that if you do a transfer request, they don't offer transport services. Sloan, are you still on? I know at one point you had left. I'll have to email her that answer.
Oh,
go ahead.
Somebody said yes, iPhone 5. Maybe that's her.
Oh, yes, you are. Okay. So when you say that you do a transfer request, but they don't offer transport services, what do you mean by a transfer?
I know what she's talking about, Judy.
Oh.
So in some districts, they let you transfer to a different school.
Oh, okay.
But if you're requesting the transfer, they tell you up front, they're not required to provide transportation, and that is correct.
Yeah.
Now, if the child has to go to a different campus due to not having, if it's our committee's decision that the child needs to go to different campus for a multitude of different reasons, then yes, they would have to provide transportation.
Wanda asked, can the school deny you bringing food for your child? I'm asking this because my son has a very small list of foods he eats, and 2 of those foods on the list must be hot, so he's not going to eat it. So he's going through an 8-hour day without eating lunch, sometimes nothing.
Oh, that's not right. That's
No.
not right. Are they telling you, Wanda, that you're not allowed to bring the food?
Yes, ma'am. My son, I have 2 children that are on the spectrum. And my son, my youngest, he just started school this year, full year of school. And Abraham has it's very minimal. And one of his favorite foods is like rice and then a Nigerian stew that we prepare for him, minus meat or anything, because he don't even eat meat. And I've looked for every container there is out there to try to keep it warm enough for him to want to eat, and I have not found it. So when I went to take him food this year, which was 2 times, I was met by the clerk in the office stating, parents can no longer bring food to the students. And the first time she let me leave the food. The second time I brought it because I'm like, he's not eating. And the second time she said, I've already told you that, per the principal, parents are not allowed to bring food. And I'm just like, I don't know what to do.
I would ask Sped Text that question.
I can tell you because we went through that with my son Christopher. And one of the biggest things that we did when we were told we couldn't bring him food, we did an art meeting and we let them know that Christopher had sensory issues with food. So there was certain textures or certain temperatures that he couldn't tolerate. Once we added that to the IEP, they could no longer tell us that we couldn't take him food. They were
That's a
able
great answer.
Okay, and I've even gone as far as just here in the last week to get a letter from the doctor.
Good.
And so I haven't been able to have this art. His art is coming up this month. So I will be able to implement that letter in the art meeting to let them know. And they know that he has a sensory, the texture, sensory. And it's just like, when I say his food list is minimum, I mean minimum.
We understand.
Yeah. Yes, thank God.
Totally understand.
First myself, I was just like, what in the world is this?
Yeah. And I realize we always tell parents to work collaboratively with schools. We know they are under so much stress, understaffed, overworked, not trained enough. But at the end of the day, this is your child. And by golly, what child is going to learn if they're hungry?
Yeah.
No child.
Wanda, they have like lunch boxes, timing lunch boxes that like if your son has like a set hour, you can pack his lunch and it will warm it up by the time that he goes to lunch. If I think I'll send it to you.
Wow.
Have like electric boxes that it'll warm up the food by the time you go to lunch.
What will they think of next?
I'm telling you,
send that to
there
me,
is a
Brenda.
God. Thank you, Lord.
Yeah, Brenda, if you send that to me, I'll make sure Wanda gets it. Or Wanda, put your email in the chat so Brenda can send it to you if you're comfortable.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Of course.
That's great.
Yeah, it is great.
Another thing too that I want you guys to know about, if they tell you something that doesn't seem right, just because the principal says something, you do want to try to work with them first, but you may have to reach out to somebody at the district level if you're having a problem like that. And also you want to ask, can you show me the board policy that supports that? Because on every website, there's a link to board policy for each district. And you can search, and it's a lot of legal stuff, and you shouldn't have to search, but can you provide me with that policy in writing? So you can search for it. I've searched some board policy in my time, but yeah, your child should be able to eat at school.
Yeah, I mean, really.
There should be a way to work that out.
Yes, because I even went as far as asking the teacher, and this was just a week week and a half ago, you know, often like, let me try this out after talking with the doctor.
Mhm.
And I said, I sent some rice and stew. I said, will you be able to heat that for him? And she said, no, I no longer have a microwave in my classroom. And so, but I had been told previously that there was one on the campus, but it's in the
Of course there
cafeteria.
is.
Yes, there is. So I'm just like, so when she said no, I was just like, okay, well, there goes his day. He won't eat today.
Yeah,
And I
that's
mean,
not good.
then I'm sitting here, you know, I'm going through a lot, you know, knowing he's not eating.
That's right. I agree with you.
Yes.
I totally agree with you. I'm glad you asked that question. Let us know how that
Okay.
works out, because
and
that doesn't feel right to us.
Not at all. Not to me either as a parent.
No, no, not at all.
And that, thanks, Brenda, because that's right here, like if you can, you're going to get some of your best information from other parents. 'Cause
Absolutely.
we all find out ways to make things work for our kids, right?
You can
We
do
are
that.
on Facebook. For any of you that are on Facebook, please go ahead and like Family to Family Network page. And all four of us are also on Facebook. If you want to send us friend requests, we'd love to be your friend. So I want to wrap it up because we went over, but this was so important. Leslie, great job. I work with such a great team. I see 2 new messages. Yikes. My child is transitioning to kinder. He has an annual ARD next week for compliance, but the transition ARD is in May. ESY is checked to discuss. Could this be addressed at the transition ARD in May?
Yeah, I mean, I would just make sure that they're collecting data and you collect your own data. Like if you have a spring break coming up and then you see him having trouble once they go back, you know, make note of all that because your input's going to be very important too. I'm surprised usually they want to consolidate ARD meetings. So I don't know, why don't you reach out to us
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand, and
by
it's late.
phone and we can discuss it.
Yeah, email either Leslie or myself. I'm the one who sends out all the emails. And feel free to, and Brenda wanted to put her email in there.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah,
looking-
perfect, perfect. But yeah, Sloan, I'm not sure I understand and I don't want to misinform you. So please email me that question if you could. Thank you all so much for joining us. Our next session will be in March. You will be getting lots of reminder notices. So thank you, thank you. I will be sending the slide deck to you in the next couple of days. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. The next meeting is in